0 days, you guys. 0 days without drama in the WNBA. WNBA Twitter is just going nuts.
It was supposed to be a coronation. It was supposed to be the moment where the sports world collectively stopped, took a breath, and handed a bouquet of flowers to one of the most dominant athletes we have ever seen.
Based off the Time magazine article where A'ja Wilson was crowned Athlete of the Year. My first reaction was, that's incredible. Congratulations to A'ja. She had an incredible season. 3-time WNBA MVP. Like, she has been on an absolute tear. I believe she is the most dominant player in the WNBA.
You would think that when one of the most prestigious publications on the entire planet decides to hand out their Athlete of the Year award, the headline would be simple. You would think the story would be about greatness, about records, about gold medals.
But I'm like, what is all this ruckus about? There's some paragraphs from this article that put down Caitlin Clark in order to prop up A'ja.
And about the sheer force of will it takes to become a champion. But we aren't living in a normal sports world anymore. We are living in a reality where the media simply refuses to let us have nice things. We are living in a world where they cannot praise one superstar without taking a swing at the other. And what happened this morning is the ultimate proof that the agenda is more important than the sport itself.
Caitlin Clark was Time's Sportsperson of the Year just last year. These are the screenshots that are going viral. Clark's emergence created a toxic, racially divisive narrative.
You have to understand, I opened my phone today expecting to see a celebration. I expected to see a highlight reel. Instead, I saw a battlefield. Something exploded online, and it wasn't a buzzer beater. It was a paragraph hidden deep inside a celebratory article that just exposed exactly what the establishment really thinks about the biggest star in women's basketball.
The racial divide that happens in America, and specifically around women's basketball. And in that article, she was asked multiple times about these narratives around Caitlin.
They thought they could sneak it in. They thought we wouldn't notice the subtle jabs, the twisted logic, and the blatant disrespect because we'd be too distracted by the shiny trophy on the cover. But the internet sees everything. The fans see everything. And what was uncovered in this article isn't just an insult.
She has denounced it so many times. She doesn't want her name to be used for these different negative and divisive things.
It's a declaration of war on the reality of the sport. We need to have a very serious, very direct conversation about the article that has everyone furious right now. We need to break down the specific words they use to blame one single player for the entire league's so-called toxicity. And we need to look at the truly bizarre, almost unbelievable claim that an injury to the league's golden goose was somehow a vindication for everyone else.
Named her Sportsperson of the Year in 2024, and then in 2025, turn around in an article, by the way, you guys, that is supposed to prop up A'ja. This is Asia's moment to shine.
Buckle up because the media just dropped the mask, and what is underneath is honestly pretty ugly. Let's set the stage so we are all on the same page. This publication crowned a new Athlete of the Year. Let's be crystal clear right off the bat. The recipient of this award is a phenomenon. She is a 3-time MVP, an Olympic gold medalist, a champion, and arguably one of the best defenders to ever lace them up. She deserves her flowers. She deserves the cover. She deserves to be the only name spoken in that room. But the writer of this piece apparently didn't think her resume was enough to carry the story. The writer apparently felt that in order to lift her up, they had to step on someone else's neck. Instead of writing a tribute, they decided to use her moment to drag Caitlin Clark into the mud. And the way they did it is so manipulative that it actually makes your head spin. The article explicitly states that while Clark's rookie season brought milestone numbers, her emergence created a toxic, racially divisive narrative. It goes on to claim that Clark was viewed as singularly responsible for saving a league built by Black players. I want you to pause for a second and really digest that sentence. Read between the lines. They are blaming the player for the narrative. They are blaming a 22-year-old rookie for the socio-political climate of the entire United States. This is the same publication, mind you, that named Caitlin Clark their Sportsperson of the Year just a year prior. Do you remember that? Back then, they were happy to ride the wave. Back then, they were happy to put her face on the newsstand to sell copies. But now that the narrative has shifted, now that it's trendy to be critical, they are painting her existence as the root cause of the league's division. It is the classic build them up to tear them down strategy, but they are doing it with a speed and aggression that we have rarely seen. Clark has denounced racism. She has denounced the toxicity. She has repeatedly on camera said she doesn't want her name used in those culture wars. She just wants to play point guard. She just wants to pass the ball. Yet the media refuses to let it go. They are obsessed with attaching her name to negativity that she has nothing to do with. By framing her success as the cause of toxicity, they are effectively punishing her for being popular. It's a bait and switch that disrespects Clark, but if we are being honest, it disrespects the winner of the award even more. Imagine winning the biggest award of your life, and the article about you spends half its word count complaining about your rival. It turns a moment of glory into a moment of petty grievance. But the article didn't stop at calling the narrative toxic. It went deeper into the psychology of what I like to call the old WNBA. There is this constant nagging insecurity that seems to plague coverage of the league, and it was on full display here. The article mentions that the storyline bothered the veterans because they felt history was being erased. They talk about losing the recipe. They talk about the fear that people will forget who built the house. Here is the problem with that mindset, and it's a problem that is holding the entire league back. It doesn't exist in any other sport. When we talk about LeBron James breaking the scoring record, do we have to spend 3 paragraphs apologizing to Magic Johnson and Larry Bird? When Patrick Mahomes wins a Super Bowl, do the broadcasters stop the show to make sure we remember Joe Montana and offer a solemn nod to the quarterbacks of the 70s? No, we celebrate the greatness in front of us. We live in the moment. We understand that praising the new generation is not an insult to the old generation. In the WNBA, however, you aren't allowed to just be great. You aren't allowed to just change the game. If you praise Caitlin Clark for elevating the league, you are immediately accused of erasing the legends of the past. It is an exhausting requirement that only exists here. It creates a walking on eggshells environment where fans are afraid to cheer too loud for the new guard out of fear of offending the old guard. The article quotes sentiments about women who have been through the grimiest of grimy things, implying that Clark's easy ascent is somehow an insult to their struggle. It's a guilt trip disguised as journalism. It's telling the new fans, you don't deserve to watch this unless you pass a history test first. And let me tell you, nothing kills interest in a sport faster than homework. If the first part of the article was annoying, this next part is downright disturbing. And I mean that it is genuinely strange behavior from a professional journalist. The article discusses the upcoming timeline, specifically referencing the periods where Clark missed significant time due to injury. Now, usually when the face of the league, the person selling out the arenas, the person driving the TV ratings gets hurt, it's a tragedy. It's bad for business. It's bad for the fans. It is a moment where everyone holds their breath. But this magazine describes it differently. They wrote that the campaign provided a measure of vindication for many players despite Clark missing most of the season. Vindication. Think about that word choice. Really let it roll around in your brain. Vindication. They are suggesting that the league needed Clark to get hurt so they could prove they didn't need her. They are suggesting that her absence was a good thing because it allowed everyone else to say, see, we are still here. They clarify very awkwardly, might I add, that the players did not cheer for the injury. The fact that they even had to write that sentence is insane. It is humiliating. Who assumes a professional athlete is cheering for a colleague to get hurt? By putting that disclaimer in, the writer inadvertently reveals the dark cloud hanging over the league. It implies there is a faction of people who were relieved to see her sidelined. It implies that the locker rooms were whispering, good, now we can get back to normal. It frames a player's physical injury, pain, and rehab as a necessary sacrifice for the vindication of the veterans. That is not sports analysis, that is resentment. It paints the rest of the league as petty, insecure, and bitter, which is incredibly unfair to the players who actually just want to hoop and compete against the best. And then we get to the numbers. This is where the gaslighting really kicks into high gear. The article claims that even with Clark out, viewership for the regular season and postseason was up 5 to 6% across the networks. They use this stat to say, see, the proof is in the pudding. We continued to rise to the occasion. We bloomed and blossomed without her. They are trying to tell you that the Caitlin Clark effect is a myth, or at least that it's replaceable. This is where the narrative completely divorces from reality. A 5% increase after the meteoric triple-digit explosion the league saw when Clark arrived? That isn't a boom. That is a screeching halt. That is the engine stalling out. The reality that everyone on social media knows, the reality that the data analysts know, and the reality that the ticket sales office knows is that when Clark first got injured, numbers dropped significantly. We are talking about reports seeing viewership dipping by nearly 50% in the immediate aftermath. The rise they are celebrating is essentially the residual heat left over from the fire Clark started. All day, you had fans buying tickets months in advance. You had people showing up to arenas in Indiana jerseys just to watch her sit on the bench and sign autographs. The interest didn't stay high because she was gone. It stayed high because people were waiting for her to come back. To spin a massive deceleration in growth as a victory, just to prove a point, is insulting the intelligence of the audience. The league was on a rocket ship to the moon, and without its pilot, it started drifting. Pretending otherwise is bad business. It's like a band celebrating that they still sold some t-shirts after the lead singer quit. Yeah, you sold some shirts, but the stadium is half empty. This brings us to the biggest tragedy of this entire situation. Who is this article for? Who is this narrative serving? It's supposed to be for the winner of the award. It's supposed to solidify her legacy as the greatest of this era. But by focusing so heavily on the Clark narrative, the racial division, and the vindication of the vets, the media has once again stolen the spotlight from the very person they claim to be honoring. I would be absolutely furious if I were the one receiving this award. She just won Athlete of the Year. That is a career-defining moment. And yet the trending topic isn't her stats. It isn't her leadership. It isn't her defense. It's the controversy the writer stirred up about Caitlin Clark. The media claims they want to protect the legacy of the veterans, but they are the ones constantly dragging the conversation back to toxicity. They are the ones who can't let the winner shine on her own merits without using her as a shield to bash the new kid. This is the definition of self-sabotage. We are in the middle of crucial negotiations for the future of the league. The players are trying to secure chartered flights, higher salaries, revenue sharing, and better benefits. You get those things by unifying the fan base. You get those things by unifying the fan base. You get those things by capitalizing on the biggest boom in the history of women's sports. You don't get them by telling half your audience that their favorite player is the source of all evil, and that the league is actually better off when she's in a cast. You don't get them by alienating the millions of new eyeballs that just tuned in. The media is fumbling the bag for these women, and they are doing it under the guise of support. It's almost as if they would rather be right than be rich. They would rather have a smaller, purer league where everyone agrees with them than a massive global phenomenon that includes people they don't like. That is a dangerous mindset for a business that is trying to grow. And let's look deeper at this concept of vindication. Why do they need vindication? Vindication from what? From the idea that nobody watched before? That's not an insult. That's a statistic. The viewership numbers from 3 years ago are public record. It is not an attack on the talent of the past players to say that the marketing wasn't there. It is not an attack on the legends to say that the world wasn't watching. It's just the truth. But instead of accepting that truth and saying, thank goodness the world is watching now, there is this desperate need to rewrite history. There is this need to pretend that the league was always this popular and that Clark is just jumping on a moving train. But we saw the train before she got there. It was moving, sure, but it wasn't moving like this. The Indiana Fever are moving arenas when they travel. Teams are changing their entire logistical operations to accommodate the crowds. That didn't happen by magic. That didn't happen because of a 5% organic growth rate. That happened because of a singular force of nature. And to deny that force of nature is to deny reality. What's even more frustrating is that the players themselves, the actual athletes, usually get along fine. We see them dap each other up after games. We see the respect on the court. Sure, it's competitive, and sure there is trash talk, but that's basketball. The toxicity isn't coming from the pick and roll. The toxicity is coming from the keyboard. It's coming from the columnists who need a villain to drive clicks. They have decided that Caitlin Clark is the villain of their story. Not because she did anything wrong, but because she represents a change they can't control. She represents a variable they didn't account for. She brought in a fan base they didn't vet. She brought in attention they didn't curate. And that loss of control terrifies the gatekeepers of the sport. They want the growth, but they want it on their terms. They want the money, but they want it from the right kind of fans. And because Clark brought in everyone, grandmas, little girls, NBA fans, casuals, she ruined their exclusive club. That is what this is really about. It's about gatekeeping. It's about saying this is ours, and you can only come in if you bow down to our rules first. But that's not how sports work. Sports are for everyone. The ball doesn't know who is watching. The hoop doesn't care about your political affiliation. And when you try to police the fandom, when you try to tell people that they are toxic for liking a certain player, you push them away. You tell them they aren't welcome. And eventually they will listen. They will turn the channel. They will go back to watching the NBA, or the NFL, or Netflix. And when the numbers drop back down, when the chartered flights go away, when the salaries stagnate, the media will look around and wonder what happened. They will blame the fans again. They will say, see, they weren't loyal. But the truth is, the media drove them away. This article is a perfect microcosm of that failure. It took a moment of triumph and turned it into a moment of division. It took a celebration of Black excellence and turned it into a debate about white privilege. It took a sports story and turned it into a culture war. And the saddest part is, nobody asked for it. The fans didn't ask for it. Clark didn't ask for it. And I guarantee you, if she could speak freely without PR constraints, Aja Wilson didn't ask for it either. She wants to be celebrated for her block rate. She wants to be celebrated for her mid-range jumper. She doesn't want to be the tool used to hammer Caitlin Clark. It diminishes her achievement. It treats her as a prop. Here, hold this trophy so we can look valid while we attack the rookie. It's cynical, it's calculated, and it's exhausting. We have to ask ourselves, when does it end? When is Caitlin Clark allowed to just be a basketball player? When is she allowed to have a bad game without it being a referendum on her hype? When is she allowed to have a great game without it being an act of erasure? And conversely, when is the rest of the league going to be allowed to stand on their own 2 feet without being constantly compared to her? When can Aja Wilson just be the MVP because she balled out and not because she represents the anti-Clark? The media is creating a binary choice. You are either Team Clark or Team WNBA. You can't be both, and that is a lie. You can love the history of the game, respect the legends like Lisa Leslie and Cheryl Swoops, admire the dominance of Aja Wilson and Brianna Stewart, and still think Caitlin Clark is the most exciting thing to happen to the sport in 20 years. Those things are not mutually exclusive. In fact, they should go hand in hand. A rising tide lifts all boats. But the media is busy drilling holes in the hull of the boat because they don't like the design of the captain's hat. The backlash we are seeing today is not hate, it's clarity. The fans are waking up. They are realizing that the articles they are reading are not objective reporting. They are narratives being spun to protect egos. They are realizing that the toxicity is often coming from inside the house. It's coming from the people paid to cover the league, not the people paying to watch it. Think about the absurdity of the Vindication comment one last time. Imagine if a reporter wrote that about an NBA star. Imagine if Steph Curry broke his ankle and a journalist wrote, "The rest of the league feels vindicated that the Warriors lost, proving that the NBA doesn't need three-point shooting." They would be laughed out of the industry. They would be mocked for being bitter and out of touch. But in the WNBA, this kind of writing is praised. It's given awards. It's put on the cover of Time magazine. It is a double standard that is holding the sport back from being taken seriously by the masses. If you want to be a big league, you have to act like a big league. And big leagues don't cheer for injuries. Big leagues don't alienate their biggest draws. Big leagues don't use their awards ceremonies to settle scores. Big leagues make money. Big leagues grow. Big leagues embrace the stars that the public chooses, not just the ones the critics choose. So as we watch the fallout from this article, as we see the tweets flying and the comments section burning, remember what this is really about. It's not about Caitlin Clark versus Aja Wilson. That is the distraction. This is about the old guard versus the reality of the future. It's about a media establishment that is kicking and screaming as they lose control of the narrative. They can write all the hit pieces they want. They can use all the buzzwords like toxic and divisive and erasure, but they can't stop the clock. The game has changed. The fans have arrived. And no amount of bitter paragraphs in a magazine can undo what we have all seen with our own eyes. The toothpaste is out of the tube. You can't put it back in. You can only decide if you want to brush your teeth and smile, or if you want to stand there and complain about the flavor while your teeth rot out. Right now, the media is choosing to complain. And the fans? The fans are just looking for a place where they can watch the game in peace without being lectured, without being insulted, and without being told that their excitement is a problem. It is a simple request. Just let them play. Just let us watch. Stop trying to engineer a social movement and just cover the basketball. Because the basketball is actually really, really good. The basketball is amazing. Aja Wilson is amazing. Caitlin Clark is amazing. Why is that not enough? Why do we have to add all this extra weight? Perhaps it's because controversy sells. Perhaps it's because anger drives engagement. Or perhaps, and this is the saddest possibility of all, they just can't help themselves. They have been fighting for respect for so long, fighting in the trenches for visibility, that they don't know how to act now that they have won the war. They are still fighting ghosts. They are still swinging at enemies that aren't there anymore. They are attacking their own allies because they have forgotten what peace looks like. Whatever the reason, the result is the same. A prestigious award has been tarnished, a moment of celebration has been ruined, and a wedge has been driven deeper between the league and the very people it needs to survive. It is a masterclass in how to fail while succeeding. It is a tragedy of errors, and unless something changes, unless the mindset shifts from protection to expansion, This cycle is going to keep repeating. We will see it with the next award. We will see it with the next contract. We will see it with the next superstar. And eventually the fans might just decide that it's not worth the headache. They might decide that the drama isn't worth the price of admission. And if that happens, if the boom turns into a bust, the media won't have Caitlin Clark to blame. They will only have to look in the mirror. They will have to look at articles like this one and realize that they were the ones holding the match that burned it all down. It makes you wonder if they even care about the sport at all, or if they just care about being right, because right now they are dead wrong. They are wrong about the fans, they are wrong about the narrative, and they are wrong about the future. The future isn't about vindication for the past. The future is about what happens next. And if they aren't careful, what happens next is going to happen without them.